The step through is one of the most debated moves in all of basketball. And today I want to break down why it is not a travel in most cases, and in some cases it may be. Alright, so let's recap the step throughs from least to most controversial. The first one is where you jump off 2 feet after your step through. The second is where you jump off 1 foot. And then the final one is a 1 foot jump, but your pivot foot elevates in a very obvious way and it may look like a travel. Alright, so let's go through this first one over here, which is off 2 feet. Now I've established my pivot foot, which is my left foot, and then I initiate my step through and I elevate off of 2 feet. And this is 100% legal in my opinion. If you believe you can jump stop and pivot and then shoot, then this is a legal move. I'm intending to go off 1 foot here, so you can see that I've established my left foot as the pivot foot again, and as I go through to my step through, I lift my pivot foot and raise up with 1 foot. Now, is this legal or not? I believe it is, and here's my first reason why. If we put some stills side by side, so we have the 2 foot jump and the 1 foot jump, you can see that they're quite similar. Both feet get planted as I step through, and both of our heels are elevated as we step through. But you can see that both versions of the step through, the pivot foot does lift, and it essentially is a 1 foot jump, even just for a split second. Jumping off the 1 foot after your step through is legal because when you slow it down, it's essentially the same thing as going off 2 feet. Alright, so we're going to go into the very last step through, which is the exaggerated 1 foot step through. You've probably seen someone like Ant Edwards do this before. So I've established my left foot as my pivot foot. Next, I've initiated a step through, and you can see that my right foot is up in the air, and my left pivot foot is beginning to lift a little bit on the heel. And as it lifts, my non-pivot foot, so my right foot here, doesn't go down, but my pivot foot lifts and I am in the air with both feet. But then I land on my non-pivot foot before I rise up for a shot. Alright, so is this move a travel? I actually think it depends on the rule set, and I'll explain what I mean. So if we look at the NBA rulebook, there's actually a line that speaks to this particular scenario. If a player with the ball in his possession raises his pivot foot, I'm beginning to raise my pivot foot here, he must shoot before his pivot foot returns to the floor. Pivot foot is in the air. My non-pivot foot here has landed, but my pivot foot hasn't, so it's not a travel, and I'm still entitled to go up and shoot. So what about in FIBA? I can't find the exact same rule that I just read out to you there, but let's go through the FIBA handbook and see what we can find. There is this little section that may explain a little bit about how this move would be judged according to FIBA rules. As if a player who comes to a stop on the first step has both feet on the court, or they touch the court simultaneously, so this sounds like a jump stop to me, which I have done here, then that player may pivot using either foot as a pivot foot. So in this case, my left foot is the pivot foot. It then goes on to say, if the player then jumps with both feet, no feet may return to the court before the ball is released from the hands. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky in my opinion, because I've raised my non-pivot foot, which is my right foot, it's going forward, and I'm about to raise my left foot, which is my pivot foot. As that completely goes off the floor, both feet are going to be in the air. And the question is, at this point, have I jumped with 2 feet? It's not quite clear. But what you'll see happen is I will land on my right foot, which is my non-pivot foot. So my left pivot foot is still not down. But this means a foot, regardless of which one it is, has reached the floor. And by this definition, I believe it is a travel. I grew up playing in an era where like this particular step through would have been called a travel on the playground by the refs. Nowadays I see a mix. Quite often I don't see it get called. It makes sense that in the NBA you can do it because they do have that particular rule, but yeah, I think it needs to be clarified. The second thing is on the other side of things, when people call any step through a travel, I think a big issue is that step throughs in real time, even the ones that I think are clear cut, legal, not a travel, they can look like one because your heel on the pivot can raise, but your foot's still on the ground as you're stepping through. And that can look like a travel to the naked eye. If you were able to slow it down, then it wouldn't be a travel, in my opinion. So I think there's, two factors at play. So in the camp of people who believe that everything is a travel, they need to slow it down frame by frame, because in real time, it's very hard to see. And then in the other camp where people say, no, all step throughs are 100% legal, I think there's this little nuance of when you do a step through in this way and you have both feet in the air before you come down and then jump again. I think that's a travel at the FIBA level at very least, and I think there's some clarification to be done by FIBA. Anyways, that's the end of the video. Keep doing your step throughs. Peace.